Be me, 32, commercial electrician, owner of a van that has never once made a sound suggesting financial stability. I repair lighting in offices, retail units, restaurants, warehouses, and the occasional apartment building where somebody has decided a ceiling fan can share a circuit with an electric oven. Most work orders arrive with 3 useful words and 1 lie. The useful words are usually the address, the fault, and the deadline. The lie is always some variation of it should be simple. The call came on a Wednesday morning from a woman who introduced herself as Clara Voss and said the marquee outside her cinema had gone dark. The whole sign? I asked. The whole sign, except the letter E. That is not the whole sign. It is close enough to be embarrassing. She gave me the address, then added, I need the repair done before 7. Why 7? Because that is when the last showing starts. You are running a screening with a dead marquee? I am running a screening with 1 letter that still believes in me. I wrote down the address. Do you own the building? I own the cinema. The building belongs to someone who believes cinemas are decorative obstacles between parking lots. That was a more interesting answer than I expected at 10 in the morning. She told me the name of the place was The Lantern, gave me the service entrance, and hung up before I could ask what kind of sign it was. The Lantern sat on a narrow street between a pharmacy and a restaurant that had changed names 3 times in 2 years. It had a shallow red awning, 2 dark poster cases, and a vertical sign that said Lantern in tall white letters. The E was lit. Everything else was black. It looked less like a theater and more like a very confident spelling mistake. Clara was standing on a folding ladder beneath the marquee, wearing black work pants, a faded green sweater, and a red scarf tied around her hair. She had a screwdriver in one hand and a flashlight in the other. A ring of keys hung from her belt. There was dust on one cheek and a thin strip of silver tape stuck to the toe of her boot. She looked down when I parked. Jonah Reed? That depends on whether the sign is going to insult me. It already has enough personality. I am trying to reduce it. She climbed down, handed me the flashlight, and pointed at the open service panel. The E is working. The others flickered yesterday, then stopped. The sign was rewired before I bought the place, which means the previous owner believed color coding was a form of surrender. I looked at the panel. Do you have the sign circuit isolated? Yes. Main disconnect is tagged. I did not touch the driver after it started buzzing. I looked at her again. Most people who call an electrician tell me what they tried after I ask what they tried. Clara had already done the part that kept the next person from getting hurt. You own a meter? I asked. I own 3. I do not use them near things I do not understand. That is a good policy. It is also why I called you instead of lying on a ladder until the sign respected me. She pulled the panel cover wider. The low-voltage LED driver was old enough to have a preferred brand of cigarette. The output terminals showed heat discoloration. The wiring into the letter channels was a mixture of newer stranded cable and older solid conductors wrapped in electrical tape. I checked for voltage on the input side, confirmed the disconnect was dead, then removed the failed driver and labeled each lead before I touched anything else. Clara stood beside the ladder and watched my hands. Do people usually watch electricians this closely? I asked. Only when they have spent 2 weeks explaining to a landlord that a dark sign is not an aesthetic choice. What happens at 7? The last screening before we close for repairs. I glanced toward the glass doors. You are closing tonight? For 4 weeks. New emergency lighting, projector service, ceiling patch in the back aisle, and a city inspection. The sign is supposed to tell people we are still alive. And if the inspection fails? The landlord gets to call the space underused and terminate my lease. She said it while looking at the sign, not me. That was the first moment I understood that the dark letters were not the real problem. I installed a new driver from my van, replaced the heat-damaged connectors, and added ferrules where the old conductors had been shoved into screw terminals. I did not make the work beautiful. I made it safe, labeled, and accessible for the next person who had to open the panel in a hurry. At 5:46, I restored power. The L came on first, then the A, then the N, T, and R in uneven order. The E was still lit because it had apparently been waiting for company. The whole sign came alive in white light. Clara folded her arms. You made it spell the name again. That is generally the goal with signs. I had another goal. She took the small black letter tiles from a plastic tray beneath the awning. They were used for the horizontal marquee over the ticket windows, not the vertical sign. She arranged them on the empty track while I packed my tools. I assumed she was putting up the evening's film title. Instead, she slid the last tile into place and stepped back. The marquee read, Jonah Reed, last showing, 7 p.m. I stared at it. That is my name. I can read. Why is my name on your cinema? She reached into her pocket and held out her phone. The screen showed my invoice, already paid. Because you fixed the sign, and because I want to ask you something without pretending it is part of the work order. The streetlights had started coming on. The red awning reflected in the glass doors. Behind Clara, the lobby was dark except for the small lamps beside the ticket counter. What do you want to ask? I said. She looked at the marquee, then back at me. Will you stay for the last showing? You put my name above the doors before asking me? It got your attention. It did. Then the system is functioning. I looked at the sign again. What are we showing? An old black and white comedy. The print is clean. The projector has been serviced. The seats are mostly safe. Mostly? The left armrest in row 4 has a complicated relationship with gravity. I will warn you before we sit down. The work order was finished. The invoice was paid. The sign repair did not make me her employee, and the screening was not a favor I owed her. That distinction mattered to me. It seemed to matter to her, too. I will stay, I said. Clara smiled like she had expected the answer, but wanted to hear it anyway. Good. I have to change before the doors open. You can sit in the lobby and pretend not to read the lease notice on my desk. I was not planning to read it. You are an electrician. You have the same relationship with warning labels that most men have with locked doors. She disappeared through a door marked Staff Only. I sat in the lobby beneath a framed photograph of the lantern from 20 years earlier, when the vertical sign had all its bulbs and the ticket booth still had a person inside it. The lease notice was on the desk. I did not read it. I looked at it long enough to know there were 6 weeks left before the landlord could decide the cinema had stopped being a cinema. That was different. At 6:30, Clara came back wearing a black blouse, dark jeans, and a silver pin shaped like a tiny projector. Her hair was still tied up, but the red scarf was gone. She had wiped the dust from her cheek. The tape was still on her boot. You left the tape, I said. It is holding the boot together. That is not how tape works. It is tonight. She opened the theater doors. The auditorium had 84 seats, red carpet, faded gold trim, and a ceiling painted the color of midnight. The screen was smaller than modern ones, but the frame around it had been polished until it caught the low aisle lights. A 35mm projector sat behind a small window at the back. Its metal housing was scratched, its real arms were empty, and a laminated safety card was taped to the wall beside it. Clara noticed me looking. I run the projector myself. You said it had been serviced. The projector was serviced. I did not say I trust it. She walked me through the emergency exits, the red indicator lights, and the seat with the rebellious armrest. She checked the house lights twice before opening the doors. At 7, fewer than 20 people came in. They bought tickets from Clara, took paper cups from a stack, and settled into separate pockets of the room. The theater felt less empty with the minute, although I could still hear every time somebody shifted in a seat. Clara closed the auditorium doors and sat beside me in the back row. She had placed a folded program on my seat. The front said, The Lantern, last showing before the lights go out. Inside, in handwriting, she had added, That part is temporary. She leaned toward me. You can leave at any point. I know. I mean it. I know that too. The lights dimmed. The projector clicked awake behind us. The beam crossed the dark above our heads, bright with dust. On the screen, a man in a hat walked into a room and immediately regretted the furniture. Clara laughed before anybody else. I watched the movie for 20 minutes. Then I watched her laugh at it. She knew where the pauses were, which lines were coming, and which mechanical sounds meant the projector was behaving normally. Halfway through, the film jumped. Clara stood at once. The picture steadied before she reached the booth door. She remained there another 10 seconds, listening. It is fine, she whispered. You said you did not trust it. I do not trust anything that has a belt and a hot lamp. She sat down again. In the dark, her shoulder touched mine. Neither of us moved away. When the film ended, everybody applauded softly, as if the building might be embarrassed by a bigger response. Clara turned on the aisle lights and walked the rows, checking for cups and making sure nobody had left a scarf behind. I waited by the doors. She came back with the empty program in her hand. How was it? The movie? The showing. The showing was good. The projector made one concerning noise. It did. And you stayed calm. I am calm in public. It is one of my least useful talents. I pointed toward the marquee. You put my name up there because you wanted to ask me to stay for one movie. Yes. What happens tomorrow? Clara looked through the glass doors at the bright vertical sign. Tomorrow I turn the power off again. I meant the other part. She studied me for a moment. Tomorrow I ask if you want dinner. If you say no, I remove your name from the sign, and we both continue having normal Wednesdays. And if I say yes, then I find out whether you are interesting outside of a ladder. I am less impressive on the ground. That is where most dinners happen. We went to a diner 3 blocks away because it was open late and because Clara said any restaurant that described itself as cinematic would charge extra for a napkin. She ordered soup, toast, and coffee. I ordered eggs, potatoes, and the burger I had been thinking about since noon. She looked at my plate when it arrived. You eat like a man who has been trapped in a ceiling. I have been trapped in a ceiling. Frequently. Only when the ceiling is poorly installed. She smiled and dipped toast into her soup. We talked about work first because it was the safe subject. Clara told me she had bought the lantern 5 years earlier with money saved from programming films at larger theaters. She had not expected the roof to leak, the projector lamp to cost more than a used car, or the landlord to treat a full theater as evidence of optimism rather than revenue. Why buy it? I asked. Because I was tired of asking permission to keep the lights on. She said it lightly, but I understood the weight underneath. You like the place. I love the place. Those are not the same thing. She rubbed a thumb over the edge of her coffee cup. Liking a building is when you forgive the bathroom. Loving it is when you know exactly why the bathroom is impossible and still pay to fix it. That sounds like a warning. It is a description. I told her about my first commercial job, where I had spent 6 hours tracing a lighting fault through a bookstore, only to discover the circuit had been switched off by a display shelf. The shelf was in charge? She asked. The shelf had a key. Then the shelf was in charge. We stayed until the coffee became undrinkable. At the door, Clara said, I want to see you again. It was direct enough that I forgot to make a joke. You do? Jonah, I put your name on a sign in front of my business. I am not going to make you infer the rest from my posture. Right. You can say you want that too. I want that too. Good. She kissed my cheek, quick and warm, then walked toward the lantern without waiting to see if I followed. I followed for half a block before remembering that she had not asked me to. I went home anyway. The next morning, she texted me a photograph of the marquee. Jonah Reed. Last showing was good. Underneath, she had added, do not get sentimental. I have a second work order. The second work order involved the auditorium emergency lights. The system had a battery backup, but 3 of the fixtures were dim and 1 exit indicator stayed on after the test button was released. Clara had isolated the circuit and left the theater closed, which meant I spent the morning replacing 2 failed batteries, 1 driver, and a fixture that had turned yellow from heat. She watched from a seat in the aisle, wearing the same green sweater and a pair of reading glasses she kept sliding down her nose. Are you always this serious? She asked. Only around emergency systems. You were serious at dinner. That was around soup. Soup has no emergency function. You have not met my family. She laughed, then went quiet while I tested the system. All 3 lights brightened. The exit sign held steady. The battery unit gave 1 clean tone and stopped. Clara stood. How much? I gave her the estimate. She paid the invoice immediately, then pointed at the rows of seats. You have spent 2 days under my ceiling. That is the job. You have also sat through a movie, eaten soup with me, and told me about a shelf that overruled an electrician. That happened before I knew you. It still counts. She picked up 2 programs from the counter. Tonight, I am testing the projector. You are coming with me. Is this another showing? No, this is a test. You are asking me to watch you work? I am asking you to choose the movie. That was how our second date happened. I chose the worst option on purpose. A long documentary about bridge construction that Clara described as an act of personal sabotage. We watched 20 minutes of steel cables being lifted over a river while she sat beside me with her arms folded. Then she took the remote from my hand. This is not a date. This is a punishment for the shelf story. You said you like structural things? I like buildings. I do not need to watch one become a sentence. She selected an old thriller from the theater's programming drive. The opening scene involved a woman in a train station realizing she had been followed. Clara watched the screen, then glanced at me. You chose the bridge because you thought I would not object. I chose it because I wanted to see if you would. You are testing me. You put my name on a marquee. That was a clear invitation? This is a clear invitation, too. She considered that. Then I accept the argument? She leaned over the console and changed the volume. Her shoulder pressed against mine. The booth was narrow, warm from the equipment, and smelled of dust and metal. When the film reached its first dramatic turn, Clara turned toward me instead. You keep waiting for permission after I have already given it. I am trying not to assume. You can ask. Can I kiss you? Yes. I kissed her beside the projector, while a fictional woman ran through a train station below us. Clara put one hand against my neck and the other on the edge of the console. She kissed me like she had made a decision and did not want to waste time explaining it. When we separated, she rested her forehead against mine. That was better than the bridge. The bridge had a strong second act. You are not allowed to defend it right now. I did not. After that, the work and the dates started taking turns until the difference between them became less useful. I replaced a loose connection in the lobby sign, and Clara brought dinner to the back steps. I tested the house lights, and she made me choose between 3 possible opening programs. I helped her measure the ceiling patch, and she made me sit in the empty theater while she played music through the sound system to see whether the left speaker still buzzed. The left speaker still buzzed. She sat beside me anyway. You can invoice me for listening to this, she said. I do not repair audio equipment. You repair things with wires. That is not a qualification. It is enough for my purposes. She kissed me before I could answer. We did not rush into calling it anything. Clara was careful with words that could become promises, even though she had no difficulty making direct requests. After the 3rd date, she said, I am seeing you exclusively. I would like to know if you are doing the same. We were sitting in the projection booth with takeout containers between us. The projector was open on the maintenance table, its lamp housing removed and cooling fan exposed. I am, I said. Good. Was that a question or a report? A question with a preferred answer. You got it. She reached across the table and held my hand. I like you, Jonah. I like that you listen before you touch a wire. I like that you do not call every problem easy. I like that you have 3 identical work shirts and still look surprised when one gets dirty. That last part sounds less romantic. It is very romantic to me. I squeezed her hand. I like you too. I like that you can tell a projector is unhappy from the other side of a wall. I like that you know when a room is full before anybody has bought a ticket. I like that you ask people to leave when they are rude to the staff, even though you are all the staff. She looked down at our hands. You notice a lot. Occupational hazard. Then keep noticing. The following week, the city inspector visited the lantern. I was not there for the whole inspection because the work was not mine to supervise. Clara had hired a licensed fire safety contractor for the alarm panel and had arranged the inspection herself. I was replacing the ballast in an old lobby fixture when she came into the room carrying a clipboard. Her mouth was set in the expression she wore when a machine made an unfamiliar noise. We passed the emergency lighting. That is good. The projector booth needs a second exit light, and the rear aisle needs one more wall fixture. That is manageable. The landlord says the lease deadline still applies even if the work is incomplete. I set the fixture cover on the table. What does the lease say? That the cinema must resume public operation within 60 days of closing, or he can classify it as a non-performing use. What is a non-performing use? A use that does not make him enough money while taking up a building he would rather turn into offices. She placed the clipboard beside my tools. We have 4 weeks left. You will be open before then. She gave me a look. You sound confident. The lights are almost done. The lights are not the whole building. I know. The ceiling patch is delayed. The projector needs a replacement lamp. The back row carpet is still wet from the leak. The city wants a second inspection after the contractor finishes. I have to sell enough advance tickets to make the landlord care that people like the place. She picked up the clipboard again. I have been doing this for 5 years. I know how to count problems. I did not mean to make it sound simple. Her face softened. I know. That is why I like you. She leaned against the wall while I finished the fixture. Her presence changed the room. Before Clara, the lobby had been a job site. With her there, it became a place where I wanted to stay even after the tools were packed. I started staying on weekdays, not every night. I still had work at other buildings, and Clara had programming meetings, supplier calls, and hours spent sitting alone in the theater with a laptop on her knees. But some evenings I would finish a job and drive to the Lantern instead of going home. Clara would leave the side door unlocked for me after I texted, and I would find her in the projection booth with her shoes off, reviewing film schedules. She did not give me a key. She gave me the access code for the side door, then changed it 2 days later because a delivery driver had written it on a receipt. "You can have the new code," she said. "Do not put it anywhere near a receipt. I am wounded by the accusation. You keep receipts in your cup holder. The cup holder is private. The cup holder is visible from space." She sent me the code. I arrived that night with groceries and a small box of replacement fuses for her spare cabinet. She looked at the bags. "You brought food. You were going to eat popcorn for dinner. Popcorn is a grain. That is not a meal. It is if you put enough salt on it." We cooked in the tiny staff kitchen. The stove had 2 working burners and a dial that turned past high into a region I did not trust. Clara chopped vegetables while I tried to make pasta without using every dish in the building. She kept bumping my shoulder with hers when she passed behind me. At one point, she held out a piece of pepper for me to taste. I took it from her fingers. She watched me chew. "You did that?" "On purpose," I said. "I did. You could have put it on a plate. That seemed less efficient." We kissed beside the sink, and the stove alarm began to chirp because I had forgotten the pan. Clara pulled away laughing. "Your cooking has a strong third act. You are never going to let the bridge go." No. By the time the second inspection was scheduled, I had stopped thinking of the Lantern as Clara's workplace. That was the mistake. It was Clara's workplace. It was her business. It was a building she had bought, maintained, and protected before I ever climbed the ladder beneath the sign. I knew all of that in theory. I forgot it whenever I saw her asleep in the projection booth with her head on a folded jacket. The second inspection passed. The landlord came by the next morning to look at the theater. I was there because I had been installing the final aisle fixtures. He walked through the lobby with a measuring tape and an expression that suggested the seats had personally offended him. Clara met him at the doors. They spoke quietly. I did not hear the full conversation, but I heard the words extension, purchase, and deadline. When he left, Clara stayed by the glass doors. "What did he want?" I asked. She picked up a roll of tape from the counter and turned it over in her hands. "He has an offer from a company that wants the building." "For offices?" "Probably. They have not decided what to call it yet." "Are you selling?" Her eyes came to mine. "I do not know." That answer followed me all day. 3 days later, I received an offer of my own. A facilities contractor in another city needed somebody to supervise a 6-month lighting retrofit at a group of hospitals. The pay was almost twice my usual rate. The work was stable, the accommodations were covered, and the start date was 4 weeks after the Lantern reopened. I read the email in my van outside a grocery store. I did not answer it. Then I read it again. I had been saving for a larger place. Clara and I had started spending most of our free time together, but we still lived separately. My apartment had 1 bedroom and a kitchen that could not contain 2 people without making one of them stand beside the refrigerator. The contract could change my finances in 1 season. It could also take me 3 hours away while Clara tried to keep her cinema alive. I told myself I was waiting for more information. Really, I was waiting for a way to make the decision without telling her. Clara made her own decision that same week. I found out because I saw a draft agreement on the counter in the lobby. It offered a 6-month extension on the lease in exchange for a large rent increase and a revenue share from private events. The agreement had Clara's initials on every page. She came out of the office carrying 2 mugs of coffee and stopped when she saw me looking at the papers. "That is not final," she said. "You are signing a new lease? I am negotiating one. With private events? The landlord wants proof that the building can make more money. The cinema can run screenings and private events without becoming an event hall. You said you hated asking permission to keep the lights on." "I hate it less than losing the building." She set 1 mug beside me. "I was going to tell you tonight." I thought about the contract email still open on my phone. When were you going to tell me about the offer? Her face changed. What offer? I had not meant to say it that way. A job, 6 months. Where? I told her. The lobby was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator behind the counter. When did you find out? She asked. Last week. And you were going to tell me tonight? I had not accepted it. Neither have I accepted this. You put your initials on it. You read it without asking. It was on the counter. So was the offer on your phone when you were standing here. I did not open it. That was the first time Clara and I had spoken to each other like opponents. I picked up the coffee, then set it back down without drinking it. You are making a deal that changes your business, and I am making a deal that changes my life. We should probably talk about those things before one of us signs. Yes, we should. But you were not going to. Neither were you. She was right, which made it worse. I left the lantern before the evening screening. For the next 4 days, we communicated through work. Messages. The exit fixture in the rear aisle needed a different mounting bracket. The projector lamp had arrived. The city wanted the fire panel certificate attached to the inspection record. Clara's messages were precise. Mine were shorter than usual. I went to the lantern once to finish the booth wiring. Clara was in the auditorium, checking seats. We worked in the same building for 2 hours without speaking about anything that mattered. At 8, I found my name still on the marquee. Jonah Reed. Last showing was good. The tiles had been left in place for 3 weeks. I reached for the first letter. Clara appeared behind me. Do not remove it. Why not? Because I have not decided whether we are finished. You said you wanted the truth. I said we should talk. We are talking. You are standing under my sign with your hand on the letter J. That is not a conversation. I turned around. I do not know what you want from me. She folded her arms. I want you to stop treating every decision as if it has to be made alone before it can be discussed. You signed a lease draft without telling me. I initialed a proposal so I could negotiate the terms. You did not tell me. No, I did not. And I did not tell you about the job. No, you did not. She looked up at the name on the marquee. I put your name there because I wanted you to stay. Then I kept acting like wanting you to stay was a private feeling that had nothing to do with the rest of my life. Her voice was calm, but her hand had tightened around the keys on her belt. I wanted to take the job because I was tired of choosing the safe version of my life. Then I kept acting like whether I took it was a private decision that had nothing to do with you. She looked at me. That is a very expensive way to avoid saying you are afraid. I am afraid. The words came out faster than I expected. I am afraid that if I stay, I will become one more thing you have to carry. I am afraid that if I go, I will prove I only wanted the version of us that fit between work orders. I am afraid that if we move in together, the cinema will become our entire life, and you will resent me for needing it. Clara looked away. I am afraid that if I keep the lantern, I will ask you to keep choosing it until you forget you had your own work. I am afraid that if I take the extension, every bad month will feel like a test you are required to pass. I am afraid that if I let you leave for 6 months, I will call it support, while quietly deciding you already chose a life without me. We stood beneath the letters. The vertical sign outside flickered once, then steadied. We are very competent at finding the dangerous part of a circuit, I said. We are terrible at labeling the wires between us. That got a small laugh from her. It was not enough to fix us, but it was enough to keep me there. We sat in the empty auditorium with the house lights on. Clara brought the 2 mugs of coffee from the lobby. Mine had gone cold. She held hers between both hands. Tell me about the contract, she said. So I did. I told her the duration, the work, the travel, the money, and the possibility that the contractor would keep me after the hospitals were finished. I told her I had wanted to say yes because I was tired of choosing the safe version of my life. She told me about the lease proposal. The revenue share was too high. The private event clause gave the landlord too much control over dates. The 6-month extension could keep the lantern open, but only if the cinema itself proved it could cover the higher rent. I need a plan that is stronger than hope, she said. I can help you build one. She gave me a look. As an electrician? As Jonah. Those are sometimes the same person. Not this time. We made a list. The cinema needed a realistic reopening budget. The projector lamp and ceiling repair had to be paid for. The private event idea needed written boundaries. The landlord needed a signed extension with a reasonable revenue share. I needed to decide whether the hospital contract was worth 6 months away from Clara and the life we were trying to make. Clara did not ask me to refuse the contract. I did not ask her to refuse the lease. That was the first repair. The second took longer. I helped her check the electrical budget, but she handled the film programming, ticket projections, and lease negotiation. She contacted the contractor for the ceiling. She arranged a pre-sale for the reopening month. She wrote the private event terms herself, limiting the landlord's approval to dates that did not conflict with public screenings. I called the hospital contractor and asked for a shorter assignment or a local supervisory role. They offered me a 3-month contract in the same city, with the option to extend if both sides agreed. The pay was still better than my usual work, but it would not require me to disappear for half a year. I took it after telling Clara. She did not celebrate until she knew I had chosen it for reasons that belonged to me. "I want you to take good work because it is good work," she said. "Not because you think staying with me is proof of love. I want you to keep the lantern because you love it and have a workable plan. Not because you think the cinema is proof you deserve me." She was quiet for a moment. "I do not think I deserve you. I know that is one of the things I am trying to change." "You are trying to change my self-esteem?" "No, I am trying to make it inconvenient for you to treat yourself like a liability." She smiled. "That sounds like electrician work." "It is relationship maintenance, different invoice." The lantern reopened on a Friday. The Marquee no longer read my name. Clara had replaced the tiles with the cinema's first program in 4 weeks. 3 evening screenings, a Saturday matinee, and 1 private rental on Sunday afternoon. She had not used the phrase grand reopening. She said it made the building sound like it had survived a war. The electrical inspection passed. The ceiling patch was dry. The projector lamp burned bright behind its housing, and the emergency lights came on when I tested the battery system. I had finished the final work 2 days earlier. Clara paid the invoice, then placed the receipt in a folder marked operating costs. "You know you can keep these," she said. "I do not trust myself with loose receipts." "That is the first honest thing you have said about your cup holder. The first public screening sold more tickets than the minimum required by the lease proposal. The second sold fewer. The third sold enough." Clara watched the numbers without turning them into a prophecy. At the end of the night, she stood outside beneath the marquee with her hands in the pockets of her coat. The letters were warm from the sign. I came out carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. She took one. "You are late," she said. The coffee line was long. "You are an electrician. You should have repaired the line." "It was a people problem. I am not licensed for those." She looked up at the sign. "I kept the Jonah Reed tiles." "Where?" "In the office. That is either sentimental or a fire hazard. Both can be true." We walked back inside. The theater was empty except for the soft hum of the ventilation system. The screen still held a faint rectangle of light from the projector booth. Clara locked the front doors and left the lobby lamps on. She led me into the auditorium and sat in the center row. I sat beside her. For a while, we listened to the building settle. "I love you," she said. She did not look at me when she said it. She looked toward the blank screen. "I love you too." She turned then. "You answered quickly." "I have had time to think." "That is not usually your problem." "My problem is thinking privately and calling it preparation." She took my hand. "I love you, Jonah. I want you here. I want you to have your own work, your own money, and a life that does not depend on whether the lantern has a good month. I want you in my life when the cinema is difficult, but I do not want you to become the person who keeps it alive by standing underneath every broken light. I love you, Clara. I want to be here. I want to repair the lights when that is my job, pay for my coffee when it is not, and live with you in a place where the kitchen has room for 2 people. She smiled. "You want to live with me?" "I want to live with you and still have separate keys, separate bank accounts, and a rule about who gets to choose the movie. You already know I get final programming authority. At the cinema. At home, we alternate. That sounds organized. It is how I express romance." She leaned over and kissed me. The kiss was slower than the one in the projection booth. There was no alarm chirping, no film waiting to be threaded, and no work order on the counter. When she pulled back, she rested her head against my shoulder. "We can look for a place next month," she said, "after your first month of reopened numbers. You are making a financial decision while holding my hand. I contain multitudes. You contain 3 shirts. They are very versatile. She laughed against my shoulder. A month later, we signed a lease on a small apartment above a closed tailor shop. It had 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with a counter wide enough for both of us, and windows that faced the Lantern's vertical sign 3 blocks away. Clara kept the cinema office keys on one ring and our apartment keys on another. I kept the hospital contract through the full 3 months, then returned to local electrical work. I still spent some evenings at the Lantern, but I stopped arriving with the assumption that every flickering light was waiting for me personally. Clara hired a part-time technician for routine equipment checks. She still ran the projector. She still programmed the films. She still climbed ladders when she had to. Although she accepted the ladder inspection I performed every time with increasingly dramatic sighs. The private events paid the higher rent without taking over the calendar. The public screenings remained the reason the building felt like itself. 6 months after the Marquee repair, Clara put the old letter tiles on the counter in our apartment. She had cleaned them and stored them in a small wooden box. The first row read, Jonah Reed. The second row was blank. "What is this?" I asked. "I am testing a new sign." "In our kitchen?" "The kitchen has better lighting." She handed me the letter tray. I arranged the tiles while she watched. The new message read, "One more showing." Clara took the tray from me and added 2 letters beneath it. Us. Then she looked at me. "You staying?" I put my arms around her. "Yes." This time, she did not need to put my name above the doors to get my attention. She had my number. She had my keys. She had a place beside her on the couch and a terrible opinion of my movie choices. The sign outside the Lantern glowed through the window. Every letter worked. I had checked it myself. Clara kissed me in the kitchen while pasta boiled over behind us, and I let it happen for almost 10 seconds before I turned off the stove. Some systems require maintenance. Some are worth staying for.